Afternoon all, welcome to Love Work Life Training Academy. Today we're going to be looking at closing with confidence for candidates and clients in a hard time. I'm still waiting for quite a few people to jump on board, but just give a quick run through of the people that are already here. So welcome to Alliance, BombBomb, TaylorMade, Cloud-Based, Recruitment 12, Brownlee, MCS, Transition Partners, Ignata, Truly Tailored, Judge Recruitment. Happy birthday, Natalie Judge. I forgot to say happy birthday to you yesterday on the webinar yesterday, but happy birthday, Natalie, from there. Premier, WH Employment, Sarah West, Kensington's, Mace, Hall Recruitment, The Contact Doctor, great name, Amicus, Nicole Curtin, and the list keeps growing and growing as people start moving on. I've got a massive training course to run through today. I normally spend a day doing this training course, and I'm going to try cram it into an hour because I think it's really important. So it is going to be very fast. It is going to be very furious. Okay. If you've got questions, please fire questions at me. I'll try to answer those questions at the end. I'm on my own today, so I've got no one sort of driving anything. So it's going to be sort of all hands to the pump from there. So in a couple of minutes, I'll start. I'm just waiting for a couple more people to sort of join in. There seems to be quite a queue at the moment. So we're up to 80% capacity at the moment of the people who said, so that's good, and people are still flying in, so that's good. So I'll give it another couple of minutes and then we'll kick off. Just want to make sure that everyone can hear me, so if you can't hear me, feel free to drop us a line, okay? Or if you can hear me, drop me a line so I know that you can hear me. So look forward to seeing those on the questions. Just drop a line on your questionnaire there saying that you can actually hear what I'm saying. Thank you, Jacqueline, much appreciated. So at least Jacqueline can hear me. So at least I'm talking to one person. Beautiful. Here we go. Don't worry, Natalie. I will sing happy birthday if I don't run out of time. Honestly, I promise. Good, right. So a lot of people on, okay. So we're creeping up, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, okay, and drive this through. The reason why I'm doing closing with confidence is during the recession of 2008, I was working for Computer People, and I was a director of Computer People in Spring. And one of the things that we worked on was what to do on the roles that we had and why we should work those roles. So we worked on the things that were most poignant at the time, and that was closing. If we had a far better qualified job than anybody else, and we closed those requirements properly, and we closed our candidates properly, then we knew we had a far better chance of actually filling those roles. So this is all about filling the roles and driving those roles to yourself and making sure we do the right things. So some of it might feel like I'm sucking eggs, that I'm teaching you things that you already know. What I tend to find is the minute detail that separates those good at recruitment to those that are really brilliant at recruitment. And that's what we're going to try and discover today, the fine details on there. So the agenda is quite a full agenda. So as you can see, we're going to go through all of this today. So there's a massive amount to sort of drive through. So I'm going to start straight off and kick straight in. So the good old ABC, always be closing, is an absolute part of recruitment. And when we first start to think about ABC, we think about the tools that are important to selling, and they should never underestimate the tools that we have in selling. And that is one mouth and two ears, and listening twice as much as you speak is so much important when we start to look at qualifying the actual requirements and things, what's going on. So you've got to make sure that when you're speaking to your candidates and your clients, you're actually listening to actually speak to them, not listening so you can answer a question. I find too many people listen to ask a question that they want to ask rather than actually listening to what's actually being said to them so they can ask the right and relevant question and drive those relevant questions into them. So learning to speak to properly is really important. When we talk about speaking properly, the golden rule is the first part of the recruitment sale, when most of the closing takes place, you should be speaking half as much as your candidates or your clients and listening to what's going on. And then you should be closing them down as soon as possible. As soon as you see and hear that opportunity to close, we should be closing all the way through the recruitment process. And I always think the recruitment process is like a corridor in a hotel. There's lots of doors on the corridor as you look down the hotel. As you walk down the corridor, you should be closing each door and locking it, because when you get to the end of that corridor, and the last door there, which is the sale door, the opportunity to make the placement, and the placement's going to happen, you can turn around and you can see a shaft of light coming out of one of the doors because you haven't closed it properly or you haven't locked it. I can guarantee you candidates or your clients will walk through that door. So don't be lazy. We've got to make sure that if we're going to be lazy, we're going to make sure that we're going to close that door and close it door properly behind you. Because if you leave it open, I can guarantee your candidates and clients will walk through that door. So where do we start closing and when do we start closing? This is what I would class as the diamond. Okay, it's the recruitment process that I've always run through and always worked at. So I always look at the start of the diamond, which is your opening benefit statement. The comment that you state to speak to a client to get through to the most important part, which is the fact find. When you're speaking to a candidate or a client, the fact find about finding what they actually want from you is really important. And it's that part that we should spend most of our time closing. And there's two different types of close that we use. And I'm going to go through both types all the way through this process. So in this part here, we should be trial closing constantly to make sure we understand what our candidates and our clients truly want from our service. The bit that I find that a lot of recruiters miss is this following bit: establishing your understanding. The reason they miss it because they feel they've actually already closed everything down when going through the fact find, when really what we should be doing is going through that fact find. Then once we've finished it, we should then go through establish your understanding and then go back to anything we've missed during the fact find. So during the next hour, we're going to talk a lot about the fact find, a lot about establishing your understanding, and then we're going to talk about the actual sale itself. Okay, and in this premise, the sale isn't the selling of your services, the sale is the closing down of the actual recruitment process. Actually the job, offering the job to the candidate and placing the person into the role for the client. That's the actual sale here. So we've got to understand both of those. To get that final close, we've got to be an expert in each of these areas. And I find that we rush through lots of these areas. So first of all, let's talk about the fact find. And let's talk about what we need to be closing down with our clients in the fact find. I think we need to be digging really hard in the fact find. We need to be digging for the information that other agencies do not get. Even if you get sent a job specification from a client, you should still go through that job specification again to ensure you haven't missed anything. Clients hold the key to everything. And the more you close the client down, the easier it is for you to actually find the candidate that you want. And that's the most priority at this point, is find the candidate that the client actually wants. So if you've got more information that's on the job spec, you've got a better chance of finding that candidate than just leaving that. So really what we've got to start thinking about is the job specification. And that job specification is important. I usually have a job specification form, and if those people have been using the academy, you'll find that there's a job specification on that form on the academy. And I have a priority with my consultants. If they came back to me with a job specification form and there was questions not filled out, there was white space on that job specification form, it means they haven't filled it in properly. They're missing information that we should be gaining from our client constantly in order to close that client off so we can find the candidate, not just a candidate. So we've got to make sure that we're working really hard on the job specification, what the company actually does, what the project they're doing, the type of employees they look for, the number of candidates they're looking for, how they recruit, who else he uses to recruit. There's lots of things on that job specification form that we should be looking for. We should also make sure that when we're going through the job specification form, we get the salary and the rate absolutely nailed on. And I work on what's called a LIM process, what they'd love to pay, intend to pay, and the bottom line. So I always think about LIM. I'd love them to pay the maximum. What the candidate clients are normally going to give you is what they intend to pay. That is what their budget is. And then they must pay is probably the bottom end of that budget. And what they tend to give you is the must or the intend to pay. If you pushed and get what they'd love to pay if they found their absolute right candidate, the candidate fit every single box and ticks every single box, then you're going to get a salary increase from what you're looking for. It means if you get the perfect candidate, you can increase the salary or the rate that you're looking to charge your client, and therefore you're going to earn more money from that. So you got to make sure that you're in that and working hard. The benefits package on a perm deal, I always find it really interesting how many consultants I hear talking to candidates, and when they're asked about the benefit package, they don't know what the benefit package is. So they have to then go back and say, I'll go find that out and come back to it. Find out what the benefit package is now. What can you work on that benefit package? What can you improve on that benefit package? It's important when taking a permanent job that you understand everything that your candidate is going to ask you and not have to go for a second call or even a third call. We need to make sure that when we're booking the job spec, we're booking the first and second interview in at the same time. If you want to drive commitment from your client, you have to book interview slots. First interview and second interview. And I always say it's first and second interview. The reason being is you might book the first interview for, so let's say a week today, and you've got all your candidates in then, and the client then comes back and says, great, I want to see candidate Y and candidate Z. And then all of a sudden, they might not be available for another 2 weeks because their diary is already booked out, because their diary is getting booked up constantly. So always book the first and second interview date when taking the job specification form. That way, you know how committed the client is to you, but also when you come to sell to your candidate, you can work out how committed your candidate is to the interview process. Are they making themselves available for those dates? We need to know when they want their CVs sent to them by. We need to understand how many CVs they want and when they want them sent by. So I always set interview feedback dates, but I always then set CV feedback dates. So I go back, and so I know when I'm sending CVs, there's a time and date that I will get a call with the client to actually go through those CVs and sell the benefits of each individual candidate back to the client. And that's important when you're in a tight market. Selling the benefits of your candidate back to the client, not just sending a job specification and hope that job specification works, and then hoping that CV matches that job specification and the candidate actually can do the job. So selling your candidate in is really important. So CV feedback date is absolutely crucial to be sent. The next thing, the world is changing. The world is changing now constantly. And therefore the interview process is going to be really important. Is it going to be over the phone? Is it going to be video? Is it going to be face-to-face? What's the actual process that goes into that interview? How many people are going to be part of that interview? How are you going to connect all those people together if it's over video or over the phone? We've got to make sure now that we control the interview process even more. And the opportunity now of using things like video interviewing means that you can control that interview process far more than you could be when it's a face-to-face, because you can also ask whether or not you can be in on that interview process, so you can hear the client, the questions, the type of questions they're asking. You can see the type of interview process that they're going through, so you know how to prep your candidates in a far more detailed way than ever before. So understanding the interview process isn't just as simple as it was before. You now have to understand it in depth. Is it going to be a test? How's that test going to be run if you're doing it over video, etc.? What's going on? So ensure you understand that. The offer process is also extremely important. How are you going to offer the candidate, or how they're going to offer the candidate, is absolutely paramount to the success. How quickly they're going to come back from that interview process to make an offer. What's stopping them if they can't come back quickly enough to you? Speed now is going to be really of the essence. There's going to be a lot of really high quality candidates out there looking for work. So the quicker your client makes an offer, the better the opportunity it has of your client actually closing down the right candidate. So understanding the offer process and then helping the client improve the offer process is important. So if you can see holes in the offer process, you need to close them down on that process straight away. Start dates are really important, knowing when your candidate's going to start from a contract or a permanent job. The location is really important. Too many times I see location being thrown up as a massive objection from the candidate because you don't really understand where the location is from the client. So if you understand exactly where the location is and what that location looks like, then when you actually start to search for your candidates, You know what is feasible from a commuting point of view and what is not. Terms and conditions are really important. Make sure you're not working jobs where you haven't got signed terms and conditions. Again, I'm certainly here that I'm probably talking to lots of people on this webinar who are working jobs right now that have got terms and conditions that haven't been signed and are open. You need to make sure you lock your terms and conditions now, even more so, because there's so much more competition out there, and there will be when we start to come out of this marketplace for your candidates and pushing into your client to try to get roles out of your client. And the big thing that I always look for on this is the number of vacancies. How many times do I speak to a consultant who only thinks they're looking for one person when actually there's a number of people that they're looking for in that vacancy, but they didn't realize that, and therefore they've only submitted a minimal number of CVs to fill one vacancy rather than a maximum number of CVs to create their opportunity to fill more than one vacancy. There's going to be lots of clients out there when the market starts to run again with multiple vacancies. So make sure you understand exactly how many people you are looking for and why. Then you need to start to look at closing the candidates. And this is where it starts to get absolutely into the nitty-gritty of the job. I always think if your candidate CV and your candidate looks exactly like the job specification, and if you read the candidate CV and it starts to tell you that person can do the job, then we need to probe deeper into the CV to make sure that that CV genuinely is a true reflection of the candidate themselves. So the first thing I always look for is the reason for leaving. In this day and age, there's going to be lots of different reasons why candidates are leaving clients, but the reason for leaving is really important. You've got to make sure you understand that, because we can use that reason for leaving constantly throughout the close when we come to the final close, especially if there's a counter offer in the offering. I would think at this moment in time, there's lots of clients that are going to be looking to counter offer candidates that they maybe put on furlough, etc., etc. So understanding their reasons for leaving now becomes really genuine importance. As I said, the salary and rate is important because, again, now we want to get our candidates what they'd love to get, what they intend to get, and what they must get. So if we look at that in that way, then we can always match our limb with our client's limb to make sure we've got an absolute match. And the definition of a sale is if your client is willing to offer more than your candidate is willing to accept, means you've got an opportunity. So if your candidate wants more than what your client is willing to offer, we've got to work with our candidate on that rate. So make sure you get all three rates from your candidate, not just a rate. It's important that you get a rate and a salary that covers both what they'd love to get, intend to get, and what they must have for their job. We also now want to start looking at what they want from their next employer. And I think now is the time to really start to think about what employers actually offer their candidates. So think about what they've done in the past, what they have done with regards to furloughing candidates, making candidates redundant, what they've done to look after candidates during the downturn, the coronavirus downturn. What have they done to make their employees feel valued, their temps, their contractors feel valued? What have they done during that process? So looking for what a candidate wants from their next employer now becomes even more critical to ensure you truly understand their reasons for leaving and what they want from their next employer. We've got to look at skills match. Does their skills actually match what the client wants? And that way, when we go back to that job specification and going through that job specification, if you've just taken a job spec off a client and you haven't upgraded that job spec, you haven't interrogated that job spec, your skill match might miss what the client truly wants. Most job specs I find have been written probably 6 months ago, 12 months ago, and never updated. I came across a client I was working with. He gave me a job spec that was almost 10 years old. Roles change, businesses change. This process has changed the whole way recruitment's going to work. So jobs are going to change as well. So a skills match is really important in what's going on. More clients are going to be looking for a behavioral and personality match rather than just a skills match. It's interesting. I ask clients an awful lot when I'm selling retainers. Do you hire on skills and do you fire on behaviors. And what I tend to hear is most clients genuinely hire on skills and absolutely 9 times out of 10 fire on behavioral issues that they have with their candidates. So if we can find behavioral matches now with our client, then all of a sudden we've got a better opportunity to give them a better qualified candidate that will stay longer with the client, saving them their money in the long term. So we've got to think about that behavioral attitude and what we can provide to a client. So therefore now when we're speaking to a client as part of our process of getting to understand our client more, it's not just about the skills. Understanding the behavioral profile that client needs is really important. And remember that every single manager out there, they will have a potentially different behavioral trait and personality trait that they want within their team. So it's not just doing it once for a client, it's doing for every person within that client that you're dealing with. Interview availability, we've talked about when we talked about from the client side. How available are they for interview? Are they willing to say they will take the dates that you are offering them because you have them already preset? If they're starting to back out of that dates now, we need to start questioning the actual commitment from the candidate. Are they truly committed to those interview days? The thing that's always missed at this time, and especially now, spouse and partner. Have they been told that you're moving job? What does the spouse and partner think about the people moving jobs? 9 times out of 10, I find candidates turn jobs down because their spouse and partner doesn't want them to either work further away from home, doesn't want them to work for that type of company, doesn't feel it's the right time for move. They have a massive say in what those people do. So it's important that we also cover that. And it's important that you make sure that your candidate has talked to their spouse and partner. Don't just ask them if they have, make sure they have. Find out what their spouse and partner actually said about that and what's going on. Location, again, is the same thing. Okay, make sure we know what the location is like. Is the commute more? Is it less? Is it going to improve their work-life balance? Is it going to be harder on their work-life balance? Okay, is the money going to counterbalance that? Do they know what that commute is truly like during rush hour when traffic starts to come back? So again, the location is important on there. And the big thing, when we come out of recession and we come out, well, it's not recession, we come out of this period of time, is what else do they have on the go? There's a lot of clients that are going to be looking for candidates and new blood in their business. So what else have they got on the go? How does your role grade against their role? Do you understand what other roles they're going for and why they're going for them and why they're going for your role? Make sure you've got candidates that are exclusive to you or have very little else on the go because you've caught that candidate early and you've sold the opportunity to have a candidate with multiple opportunities in different clients that you are working with. Therefore, you have one candidate going for multiple interviews rather than you having a candidate that's got multiple opportunities through lots of other agencies where it's going to become an absolute problem to control. So make sure you understand what they have on the go. We should always be asking for reference names. We should always be asking for leads. And the big thing that we should always ask before in this market is who else do they know? Because at this moment in time, as clients furlough candidates and make candidates redundant, who else they know is really important. You can start to find great talent now in this marketplace by asking candidates, and they'll be more obliged to give you that information because everyone now is in the same boat. So let's start working really hard on building our candidate database by asking every single candidate, who do they know? Who else do they know? So how often should we be closing? And this is the key, and this is the question. I hear the answer an awful lot of, I should be closing when I get to the end of the interview process. Well, actually, we should be closing constantly every time we speak to a candidate and client. From the first conversation that we have with them, we should be closing things down that we can use and we can use as leverage further down the sale. We need to make sure we are closing constantly through every single part of the sale. So what's the first thing we should ask when we next speak to a candidate and client once we've already spoken to them? The first thing I always ask, has anything changed since last time we spoke? If I've gone through a whole fact find and I understand exactly what the client wants from a job specification point of view, and I've spoken to a candidate, I understand what the candidate wants from their next role and what they're looking for, etc., Within 24 hours, things can change. So if we haven't asked next time we go on, has anything changed since last we spoke, then you will never know. And sometimes that can be a massive hurdle when we get further down the sale because we weren't assured that it was there. So asking, has anything changed constantly throughout the recruitment process is really, really important. So once we've gone through the fact find, we get to establishing your understanding. So why is it important? We've now got a file of information on the candidate and a file of information on the client of what they want. We need to make sure that nothing is missing. So if we've been closing every segment down during our fact find on the candidate and client, then we understand that there's nothing missing. So we need to make sure that when we then come to here, we know exactly how to help our candidate and how to help our client and find exactly what they want. And it's important because candidates and clients sometimes have a little bit of fog and haze around them about what they actually want. They need someone to steer them in the right direction to actually so they fully understand what it is that they truly want rather than what they think they want. And there's a very big difference to that. So understanding that by establishing and going through everything they've talked about through that fact find and regurgitating it to them, it gives you a shopping list. It gives you a shopping list to sell against for both the candidate and the client, which increases desire from both parties. If you have got a really good job specification and you sell it to your candidate, it increases the desire for your candidate to work for that client. If you take a really good candidate and you take that back to your client and it matches the job specification, then it's increasing the desire of that client to buy that candidate. But if you've missed things because you haven't gone through that fact find fully and you haven't pre-closed all the way through that fact find, then you're going to lose parts of that desire or not even have the desire at all. So increasing desire by having a shopping list and ticking off against that shopping list is always important to make sure you get to the end. It also, as you recap, it gives you time to think. What have you missed that you should be asking both the candidate and the client? It gives you time to recap on that, but it also gives the client and the candidate time to recap on what they actually want. And they might give you more information from that. So I always ask at the end of my establishing my understanding, is there anything I've missed that will help me help you find either the right job or the right candidate? And that often leads the candidate or the client giving me more information, what they want to find out either about the client themselves or more information from the client's point of view about what they actually want from their candidate. So it's important that we work really hard and close constantly through all of that process all the way down the line. So when and why do we trial close? Because all what we're talking about is trial closing, whether it be a mini trial close on a mini part of the fact find or a big trial close when we start to understand what we want and what we require. Trial closing is really important. So we need to trial close at the end of every mini section. Every time a candidate talks about a certain thing or a client talks about a certain thing, we need to close that section off. So we need to finish it with a statement. So what you're telling me, Mr. Candidate, is that you would like to leave this position because of X, Y, and Z. And you want your candidate to commit to that. So then you know that you've not missed anything. Same with the client. So what you're telling me, Mr. Client, is you want to pay the candidates this rate, but you can find the money to pay this rate for the perfect candidate. So you now start to again get commitment in mini chunks constantly throughout the sale and constantly working that way. You need to establish at the end of your understanding that there is nothing that you have missed. And it's important that we do that all the time, which is why it's important to give you a shopping list to sell against to increase that desire. So closing every mini section and establishing your understanding is important, because when we come to sell the opportunities, making sure we can tick everything off against that shopping list is the key. If you've got more things on your shopping list, you have more opportunity of finding the right candidate to fit the client. You're looking by design, you're not looking by luck. So to give you time to recap and rethink is really important. And I'm repeating what I've just said on the last slide because it is so important. It's so important to think and recap constantly, because recapping constantly jogs the candidate or the client's memory on certain things and enables them to think of new things that they may want or new things that may prevent them taking a job, etc. So giving them time to think is important, because you want to make sure that as they are thinking, they're coming back to you with the information that you want, and that's going to increase desire and commitment. But what it also means, it means that you can make an informed decision. At the end of every time you take a job specification, you must be able to make an informed decision of whether you want to work on that role or not. Is that role achievable? Can you fill that role? Or is the client looking for the purple unicorn? You want to make sure when you speak with the candidate, will they and can they do the job? We want to make sure we've covered all of those things off. And you've got to be able to make that informed decision, work the job or not, submit the candidate or not just work the job because it's there and submit a candidate because they're reasonably good fit to the job. By making a true informed decision now, you're going to save yourself time by not working roles that aren't fillable, and you're going to save your clients time by only sending candidates to them that are an absolute perfect fit for their role, which means your client will see you in a completely different light compared to other agencies who are giving candidates who are a poor fit to their role and wasting the client's time. So it's important every time we speak to a candidate and client, we find out has anything changed since last time we spoke, because one thing may change, which might change the whole job spec, which might prevent the candidate from taking that job. One thing may change the candidate's life, which might mean they might not want to go for interview, or you should really pull them from that interview. So has anything changed? But remember, do not sell your services or the job to a candidate or client until you've passed this point. And the point is the shopping, the fact find, and then establishing your understanding. If you have started to sell before this point to the client or the candidate, you may miss reams of information that are critically important for you when it comes to the close. So we need to prepare to crown your candidate and client. What we're talking about here is we're talking about the recruitment process. So we're talking now about the pre-interview stage, and we're talking about this is where you're most likely to lose control. This is the process you need to sort of look at and think, marks out of 10, how good am I at this process? Ensuring we have all the information required when we start to trial close is really important. But as we move further down the sale and we come to the actual close, it is critical that we actually understand how we're going to crown our client and how we're going to crown our candidate to make sure we get there at the end. So the most important thing is we need to know the salary and rate, because this is above the line. So this is before the candidate and client, before the candidate goes for interview with the client, we need to make sure we understand the rate and salary, and the candidate understands the rate and salary absolutely. We need to understand that if we are going to submit a candidate to the client, that the candidate can commit to the interview times and interview dates. We need to make sure that the candidate can and will be able to do the job, because there's no point submitting the candidate before we agreed that, because if they do not, or you do not think they can and will not be able to do the job, then why are we submitting the candidate? And so we will all have that sixth sense inside us. Well, I'm not sure about this candidate, I'm not sure about that. And my comment is, if you have that sixth sense and you feel that you aren't sure, you need to be going back to that candidate or back to that client and probing that to ensure you understand absolutely why that is, and then make an informed decision to submit or not. We need to close down the interview dates, okay, and make sure that during the interview dates, and we're closing those down, that they are fully committed, because we need to be doing interview preparation with the candidate constantly through this process. So the interview preparation is a time to recap everything again. It's another time to speak to the candidate, and we should be doing lots of interview prep, not just the night before. If a client gave me an interview today and the interview was next Wednesday, I'll be speaking to the candidate almost daily, preparing the candidate to meet that client, preparing for the interview. I can then start to gauge what's going on all the way through that process. I can see how committed my candidate is, and I'm upskilling the candidate to the utmost degree to ensure they pass that interview with flying colours. Once we get beyond the interview, we've got to make sure that we're getting interview feedback from our client and from our candidate. So we need to set that interview feedback time and date with them to ensure that when we do that, we absolutely get the information quickly and thoroughly. Therefore, if you can insert yourself in on a video interview or in on a face-to-face interview, you're getting that information almost firsthand. If the client leaves, the candidate leaves that interview and you're speaking to your client, you can gain that information straight away from that client firsthand. You can use that information to feed it back to other candidates coming into the interview process later on down the line. You can also go back to your candidate instantly and get feedback straight away. So interviewing feedback is really important, because we then need to move on to the formal trial close. And we've got to understand what the formal trial close is with our client and how we're going to work that. And I'm going to move on to that in a minute, because the final part is the offer. And we come to make the offer, we've got to make sure we're offering our candidate a role that they are genuinely going to accept. And we're going to talk about that constantly. So it now becomes even more apparent and important that has anything changed since last time we spoke, because now the candidate and client have met each other, things may have changed dramatically. So we need to make sure that we are covering this purposely. So, trial closing above the line. At the end of each call, a trial close is essential. And the trial close should always be about the location. Is the location right? What does your spouse and partner think about the job and your understanding the job? We should be closing the salary. So if the client offered you X rate or X salary right now, based on what you know, would you accept the offer? And we need to be saying that on the end of every single call to make sure we get an affirmative, but it's how your candidate says yes. You're looking for a yes in an enthusiastic way. You're looking for a yes where they're asking more questions. Because if you get a no, or you get a yes that lacks the enthusiasm, you've got to start to understand, is that candidate as committed as you thought they were in the first place? So trial closing now becomes really important as we go above the line before we get into that interview stage. And if your candidate doesn't sound committed as they did before, tell them you don't sound committed and probe the reasons why, so you understand the reasons why. You need to be prepared at this stage to pull the candidate from the process if the candidate isn't committed to the role. You need to think about stopping working roles with clients, again, if the client isn't committed to the role. So closing above the line is really important, and closing that candidate down on the salary expectation, the location and the job is really important. Ensuring they have the permission and not permission's not the right word, but their spouse is absolutely committed to them moving role is really important. So make sure we're understanding that throughout the line. So when we talk about then trial closing below the line with the client, we talk about, has anything changed since last time we spoke? Because the next time we speak to our client is after they've interviewed the candidate. So lots may have changed. So we may need to understand what that is. If the client, though, is going to offer, we need to understand and confirm the maximum and the minimum that the client is willing to offer, either a rate or a salary. And it's very strange sometimes asking for the minimum. And the reason why I say the maximum and the minimum is we go back to what we talked about before when we talk about limbs. More often than not, when you speak to a client, you get what they intend to pay. And that is usually their minimum. But if you've got a perfect candidate, you may get more out of them. So again, we need to drive back into the client to understand that we actually have their maximum and their minimum that they're willing to pay. We then need to reconfirm the benefit package to make sure that we're selling the benefit package correctly and it's exactly as described to our candidate. because benefit packages can be used to negotiate part of rate and salary if required. So understanding the benefit package now is important if you didn't get so in the past. So it's important that we get it now. As a formal trial close below the line is we're now getting the information that we're going to give to our candidate when we make the formal offer. So duration of the contract is obviously one. Can you upsell that duration if possible? Can you make it longer? The start date for the client, for the perm role, again, we want to drive in that. Can we bring that start date forward? Can it be delayed depending on the notice period of your candidate and what's going on? And if a client offers lower than expected, what can we do to sweeten the deal? Sometimes a client will say, yes, I'm happy to interview that candidate at 50K, and then come back and say, oh, he's not quite as good as I thought he was, I'll offer 47.5. We need to understand why they're offering lower in the first place, but we need to understand what we can offer that can sweeten the deal to the client, to the candidate. Are they offering a salary review within a certain period of time? Are they offering a better benefits package than they're currently on? What is it they're offering? Are they offering training that may develop the candidate's skills and give them a better outlook further down the line in their career? What are they offering? We need to understand that if the candidate accepts quickly, how quickly can we get the offer out in writing? I've seen this being a very, very big downfall for a lot of clients. An offer has been made, then it takes them weeks to get an actual offer out in writing to the candidate. And by that time, the candidate has taken other roles elsewhere. When we come out of the current situation, there's going to be lots of roles potentially on, which means there's going to be lots of pressure on each individual candidate. So how quickly that client can get the offer out in writing to your candidate is really important. Is that something that you should have agreed before we got to this stage? Absolutely. Is that something extra you can offer your client? Give me your offer letter. I will create that. I will do that for you. I'll work in conjunction with your HR department, and I will get the offer letter out as soon as the candidate has accepted. So we know what's going on, everything. We need to make sure now with the client that there is nothing that will prevent the deal from taking place. There is nothing that will prevent this deal from taking place, such as we should have checked when taking the job specification, has the budget been signed off? We should have checked when taking the job specification, is this the person that actually signs these deals off? We should be checking all sorts of things which happen during that job specification stage that may prevent the deal from happening. But something may have changed since last time we spoke. So we need to make sure we understand that there is nothing that will prevent that deal happening. So we are now closing all the doors firmly behind ourselves. So as we move on into our trial close below the line for the candidate, it's the same thing. We should never offer a candidate up front, because we should only be offering candidates that we know will accept. So I would always state to a candidate, the initial feedback sounds very encouraging. Everything sounds like you're going to get an offer, but I need to run through some questions first and foremost. We need to run some questions to make sure we create and whet the appetite more of the candidate, increase the desire to take the job. So I want to know how the candidate felt about the interview process. What was good, what was bad about the interview process? What do they feel about the client? I want to re-explore now the candidate's reasons for leaving, because I want to make sure that the reasons for leaving were genuine and they are still applicable now, because they will be reminding the candidate constantly of why they are leaving, because that shouldn't change. We need to make sure we explore again and capitalize on those reasons for leaving. We need to put money to one side. Does the position hit all the candidate's hot buttons? Will the candidate take the job? If it wasn't for money, would you take that job? Does it fit you perfectly, both from a technical skills point of view, a personal point of view, an ethical point of view, a work-life balance point of view? Does it fit the candidate's actual desires and wants? We need to find out how the candidate feels about working for the client and the company. I've heard this quite a lot of times. I really like the company, but I didn't like the manager that interviewed me. And I've heard it the other way around. I really like the manager, I just don't like the company. I didn't realize they did this, I didn't realize they do that. So understanding that is really important to make sure we get everything that we want from there. We need to establish if your candidate has any concerns about the position before closing the candidate on money. So if there's anything that we need to know now about the partner, the spouse, the job, etc., 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 now's the time to find out before we start speaking about money. Because again, we're now closing the door firmly. We're closing the doors on everything that we need to close the doors on before we get to the big one that may explode in our face if we don't cover the final barrier properly. The big one is obviously money, money, money. So we need to re-establish the rate or the salary that was agreed with the candidate prior to the interview. And what I mean, again, by establishing the rate is you should have got what they'd love to have, what they intend to have, and what they must have. If we've got those three rates and we know exactly what they will accept, and we know that the definition of the sale is if the client is offering more than the candidate is willing to accept. If our love is lower than what the client is willing to offer, we know we've got a placement. We know we've got a potential offer placement in hand. We just now need to handle it really carefully. However, if the candidate now starts pushing back on their original thoughts and their original agreement on salaries and rates, we know we've got a problem. So we've got to re-establish them really importantly. So now we go into that formal trial close. When I go back to my client with your feedback, that's if the feedback is positive. If the client offers me the expected rate or salary, can I accept on your behalf? And the expected rate on salary we should be looking for is the lowest salary. We want it low on their must salary level or their must rate level, because if the client is offering more, we can go back then once we formally offer and actually give a bigger rate, which again increases desire and shows that you've got the candidate's interests at heart. So when I go back to the client with your feedback, if the client offers the role at the expected rate and salary, can I accept on your behalf is really important. And then be quiet and listen. Listen to what the candidate has to say. It should be great news if it's a yes. You want to then call the candidate back in 20 minutes. You want to go speak to the client and call the candidate, but you want to confirm that you can accept on their behalf. So again, you're formally trial closing them down, okay? If it's a no, you need to explore the reasons why and find out why it's a no. Because again, at this side, if they don't sound committed as they did before, be prepared to pull the candidate. Be prepared to tell the candidate you've got other candidates in the process. We need to put some pressure on to truly understand why that is. Is it something that we can overcome? Is it something that we can change? So we must close the door firmly now so it doesn't blow up in our face when we actually make the final offer. So the actual close, again, if it's a separate call, has anything changed? And even in 20 minutes, something might change. So only offer the candidate if you know the candidate is going to accept. Call the candidate back and call back with enthusiasm, because remember, the definition of close is offering more than the clients are offering more than the candidate is willing to accept is important. So I've got great news. The client has offered you, and I'm pleased to tell you, I've accepted the offer on your behalf as instructed. So again, we are enthusiastic to the candidate. We're giving them good news. So let's make them take that good news, okay? And then be quiet and listen. Being quiet and stopping speaking now when we're offering is the ultimate close. Let the candidate now speak. If we pre-close properly, then all of a sudden we know they're going to accept. So we should be able to hear that down the line and hear that joy down the line. But now we need to close firmly. We need to email everything to the candidate, get them to email back straight away that they confirm what they've sent to us by return. We need to make sure that we can get it out in writing to the client straight away. We need to discuss the counter offer. It's a separate course on the counter offer, but we need to discuss the counter offer with the client, the candidate. What's the client done in the past when other people left? Have they counter offered or not? We need to know how to combat the counter offer, and we need to discuss it now. It needs to be discussed all the way through the recruitment process, but now's the time to really nail it down, okay? We need to explain the procedures of the offer and the aftercare service, okay, to make sure they understand what's expected of them. They're going to receive an email. We're going to talk about the counter offer. I want to know when you've resigned. I want to know whether you're going to start again, and put those in writing so the candidate knows exactly what's going on. We need to make sure we're driving everything from there. So make sure all the doors down the corridor are firmly closed. So then we start to think about what happens if you lose control and you're out of control. We need to start to think about things such as the deals you think are going to happen don't happen. It means you're losing control of your client. You're not as in control as you were. It means your candidates aren't buying into you. If the deals you think are going to happen aren't happening, you're missing something somewhere along the line. You're not closing properly. If you start to feel desperate, you start to cut corners. Again, it's about cutting corners that stop deals happening. What I find through the recruitment process, as people get better at it, they start to stop little bits because they don't feel they're important, when actually every single bit is important to make your engine run smoothly. If you take one part out, the engine might still run, but not as smoothly as it was. Cutting corners is the same thing. So if you start to feel desperate and know you're cutting corners, you know something's going wrong. So you're out of control. When you're not hitting your KPIs, you know there's something going wrong. Or you're hitting your KPIs and you're not getting results. It goes back to the first two things. You know, you're feeling desperate, you're cutting corners, and deals aren't happening. Sometimes in sales meetings, when a consultant says, I'm going to make this deal, okay, your colleagues give you that look of going, yeah, never going to do that, never going to do that, okay. However, it sort of says that your colleagues think that you're not going to make the deal because they think you're out of control, you're not happening. So you've got to start reining that in and start to look for those little signs. As managers, look for the signs that your colleagues are giving you. But obviously, if you're having too many meetings with your boss about performance, you're out of control. So where's the first and constant loss of control? Candidates and clients, okay? The first call is where you should start to gain control straight away. By not setting expectations on that first call, it's likely you're going to start to lose control somewhere further down the line. Lack of commitment on the job spec and lack of flexibility on when taking the job spec from the client sort of says you're not in control, the client's in control. If you're not booking interviews at the interview stage, okay, again, you've got lack of commitment and lack of control. The offer stage, if you come to the offer stage and candidates are walking away from you at the offer stage, okay, it shows that you've had a lack of control all the way through the process. And pre-offer stage, post and pre-offer stage and start date stage, Again, if you are losing people at this stage, it says you haven't controlled the process as tightly as you should. So we need to start to think about the indicators, the warning lights of what's going on in there. So the client won't agree to give you interview dates. So you may be asking, great, but if the client doesn't agree to those interviews or won't give you interview dates, how certain are you that the client is actually committed to the role? How certain are you that the client is actually going to take the role all the way to fruition or not? The client won't return your terms and conditions signed. That is a huge giveaway that they're not committed to you or your process. So why would you work with a client in that way if they're not willing to commit to you by signing your terms and conditions? If you've got candidates that are constantly dropping out of the process, it says something either about your process or the client's process that you need to address because you're out of control. If clients start asking for skills that have been specified in the past, it says you haven't taken a strong enough job specification. If you have a candidate who's interviewed and the client comes back and said, you didn't have this skill and that skill, and you didn't know about that skill, that's your problem. That's you out of control because you've cut corners when taking the job specification. So to work hard on that. If you're receiving little or no feedback, how many times do we work with a client or a candidate and they just disappear off the face of the earth? It happens constantly. And yet we're still chasing, and yet we work with that client again and again and again, or we work with that candidate again and again and again. Why? If they're not giving you feedback, or they refuse to give you feedback, you've got to inform the client and inform the candidate what's going to happen. And if so, walk away. Because clients stop answering your calls quite a lot. And I see this, oh, he won't pick up the phone at the moment, he must be really busy. No, he's not committed to you. Address it head on or walk away and find one that is. If candidates get rejected for unknown reasons by clients, again, it sort of says you're not in control. If they won't give you a reason why they're rejecting a candidate, you're not in control. So you've got to make sure you're in control, okay? And if candidates and clients start making unrealistic demands on your time and on the money, etc., you're not in control. So again, walk away from that situation. To regain control, we're back to the ABC of closing. To regain control, we need to stop, breathe and think. Go back to basics. Call the candidate or the client and find out exactly what the issue is. State your concerns and address them quickly. Then advise, consult. You're the expert, you're the influencer in the marketplace. So advise your candidates and clients what's going on and consult with them. You're the expert. If they're not willing to listen to you and they're not willing to mold into the way you recruit because you are the expert, then again, you're not in control of your recruitment process. If they start to agree and change, again, we need to agree new expectations, both verbally and written. Get them written down so they can see them constantly and they know what's going on. And then we need to start trial close again, all the way through the process. We need to re-establish control by trial closing, both verbally and written. But be prepared to walk away. Do not compromise or get desperate. But by compromising and getting desperate, you start to work roles that you're never, ever going to fill. So, to triage and make a decision, stop, breathe and think. Seek advice. If you're not sure, speak to your manager, speak to somebody else, seek advice from that person. Review your situation and where you are and create a plan to either proceed or not. And that's a really interesting thing, to proceed or not, because most recruiters just simply carry on and proceed rather than walking away. And by the time they walk away, it's too late. They've wasted a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks working on roles that were never going to come to fruition. Think, the national average is 2 roles filled out of every 10 roles a permanent person takes on. So that means 80% of your time is wasted on roles that you would never fill. So why not do a proper job when taking the job specification, when qualifying the candidates, and create a proper plan, and then take an informed decision to either proceed or not if you don't think you've got the true commitment that you need, and walk away. By walking away, it means you can invest more time in clients that are more committed to you, and therefore your placement ratios will start to increase. So stick to your plan. Do not compromise on quality or service. And as I said, be prepared to walk away. Sack the candidates and clients that you're not in control of and go and find a better one. So that, in an hour, ladies and gentlemen, is closing with confidence in a hard time. So if you've got any questions, feel free to drop some questions. As I said, I probably spoke very quickly through there. There'll be a recording of this webinar on our website within the next 2 or 3 hours. So if you want to go back over it, it's there. If you like what you've heard and you think you've learned something from today, please put a post out on LinkedIn with Love Work Life Training Academy tagged in there. Okay, share those posts. I want to get every recruiter we can working together and working hard. Owners on here on this call, if you feel that you could benefit from the academy, by all means give me a call. Yes, there's a price page on the academy. Don't worry about the price page. Just give me a call and we'll come to some form of agreement. I think it's now the time we need to reach out and help each other and drive each other. Okay, so there's questions coming through. Interested in listening about techniques to close where fact finding's being done just needs closing, from Phil Hodson. Absolutely, Phil. Where the fact finder's being done, we need to close all the way through that fact find. every little part, that fact find that you do, close down every individual section and then close it completely when you come to your understanding part. Making sure that you do that, because that is really important. It gives you 2 or 3 opportunities to close the same thing. So it means that you're programming your candidate and your client constantly on what you've closed on. You're getting firm commitment all the way through the process. So keep closing in that way. Before I close off, is there any other questions or anything else that people would like to ask on closing that they haven't heard or they think is right or wrong? Just waiting for questions to pop through as people should be typing. See what we've got here. Okay, please could you send the slides to my guys in the office. Rory, I'd love to be able to send the slides. I can't send all the slides because the file is huge, as you can get. But as I said, they will be all on our website, www.loveworklifeconsulting, under the client chat room page. I'll send a link out to everybody so they've got that from there. If not, try and find us on YouTube. We're on YouTube, and they'll be on YouTube as well from there. So I'm afraid I can't from there. From Richmond, we're struggling to control the HR managers, the whole process. We're unable to speak directly with key decision makers. Any suggestions? Yes, Rich, if you can't, if you're not speaking to the end person, you've got to work with the people that you have, but they've got to be able to understand why you want to speak to the end person and what benefits it will give them. I think the problem is that HR in the past has seen recruitment as a necessary evil rather than an actual fundamental part of their business process. And so it's how you interact with your HR people and other people in the process, and how you benefit their job, how you make their job easier than allows you to get further into the process. Now's a great opportunity to be speaking to those people and to find out what you can do to help them in the future and drive things in the future. But then you've got to try and get things from them as well that help you. So things such as not speaking directly to the decision makers is a real problem. So you need to tell them that they're understanding that, because Chinese whispers dilutes the recruitment process, because it dilutes the information that you're getting. So if you're going back to your HR or your internal recruiter and you're having that conversation with them, you need to make him aware that you are not trying to do them out of a job or usurp their job or their importance. What you're trying to do is get a far better understanding by going to the horse's mouth and speaking to the horse's mouth, which will improve their service to them, okay, which will mean you, HR, or you, internal recruitment, will look far better. So you've got to make sure you're doing that from there. As I said, it's a very much going back to basics thing, and it's doing the things on those sort of lines. One thing I'm offering tomorrow is we think it's time that recruitment got together and had a bit of a knees up. Obviously, in this moment in time, it's very hard to do that. So we're offering a virtual beer tomorrow. So I'll be putting something out on LinkedIn soon, and I'll drop an email to everybody in this list. If you want to join Paul and I for a virtual beer at 5 o'clock tomorrow, we want to hear your success stories, whether they're in work or outside of work. We want to hear what's going on that's positive in the marketplace, and just have a bit of human interaction. I spoke to a client today, and he said one of his consultants, they live on the 50th floor of a tower block in London. He lives on his own. He hasn't seen anybody for something like 7 to 12 days, and he's going a bit stir crazy. So this is our opportunity to reach out to all those type of people and get those people involved in this type of thing. So as I say, if you've enjoyed the webinar, thank you very much. Please like and share it on LinkedIn. Put a little post out there, mention our names. It'd be great. Okay. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Next Wednesday, we'll be doing another webinar. If you've got suggestions, file them in. All that leaves to say is this is Live, Work, Life. Thank you very much. I will see you next week.